and pleased to support it. Kia ora.
Ka karanga ahau kia Melissa Lee.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Madam Speaker, it's a great opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to take a call on the Financial Services Legislation Amendment Bill, sometimes called FSLAB, and I think sometimes it was actually called FSLAB. In Parliament, we often actually come across some acronyms, and I think I was actually picked up on one of the newspapers suggesting that I didn't actually know what the legislation was because I didn't know what FSLAB was versus FSLAB. I'm going, what was that? And I just want to say I do actually know what Financial Services Legislation Amendment Bill is all about. As earlier speakers have actually said, there were at least 71 different organisations and individuals who actually submitted to this legislation, to this bill, through the Select Committee. And we heard from 34 of them, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Chair and the members. And there are some new members to the Economic Development, Science and Innovation Select Committee, and I'd like to welcome them. I would also like to acknowledge Minister Honourable Chris Farfoy. This is the first chance I've actually had to, in this chamber, to thank him for the support of his officials and commend him on being named as the new Broadcasting, Communications and Digital Media, particularly Digital Media Minister, in addition to his role as Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister. I'm sure that he has a lot of work already. He has a big workload, and I hope that he is up to the task of the massive issues that is the digital sector is actually facing. If I could actually go back to one of the things that Jonathan Young has actually mentioned, this bill seeks to, in terms of what this bill is actually about, this bill actually seeks to establish a new regulatory regime for financial advice and financial advisors in New Zealand and to amend requirements for registration on the Financial Services Providers Register to prevent its misuse. The bill is actually based on a statutory review of the existing regulatory regime, which was completed in 2016. And many members have actually mentioned the particular point in terms of removing the requirement that only a natural person, meaning human beings, to be able to give financial advice, to in fact allow for provisions on online advice called robo-advice. And I want to get to that particularly. Some members have actually sort of talked about the telephone call that people make to, let's say, a bank, and actually saying, press 1 for this thing, press 2 for this thing. And recently, I've had an opportunity to meet with and actually visit some of the New Zealand's very innovative companies, such as FaceMe and Ambit, and to actually show what their business is actually capable on and what they're actually innovating in this space of digital technology. And one of the things that I actually came across was an avatar. This particular company had developed an avatar. It's a face, it's a computerized face, which was a meld of Maori, Asian, and Pacific faces, and actually looked like one of my goddaughters, who happens to be Samoan, Dutch, and Chinese. And this avatar was able to provide financial advice. For example, I think this particular one was actually developed for the ASB Bank. And what this avatar and the robo-advice can actually do is that with the access of the person's identification card or the bank card number or a bank customer number, they can get advice from this particular computerized robot to say, for example, I want to buy a new car, and the robot can actually say, you are able to borrow or have the capability to borrow a certain amount of dollars from your past history. This is something that new technology is making happen in New Zealand, and some of these New Zealand companies are leading the way in this new digital era. And all that AI technology that people actually talk about actually puts us in a space where instead of having real people providing financial advice, there are technical things that even robots can actually do and hopefully the regulatory regime that actually removes requiring the natural person to be the only ones who can actually do this will provide the banks to provide sometimes simple advice that robots and some more complex ones that robots can actually provide to the customers. I think it is important to note that during the national-led government, we improved a number of existing matters in the financial sector, including tightening the market regime for those who provided financial advice. And also, we strengthened the reputation, New Zealand being holding the reputation as a good place to do business. And I think that is really important. And when we actually talked about, some of the members have actually sort of talked about how in the 80s with the market, stock market crashes and everything that has actually happened around the world, people are very gun shy in terms of what they will actually invest in. And often we're dealing with, mums and pas, and people have actually said that. And often they don't actually have the expertise, nor do they actually have the sophistication to think about what they can actually invest in and what kind of benefits that they will actually have. And it's very important to make sure that we have a trustworthy, a very good regime that can actually protect the customers, and making sure that what little or how big, it doesn't really matter. I think one of the members opposite actually said we need to protect both the people in the high end and the low end of the spectrum when it comes to investment, to protect the customers, to make sure that they get very good advice. And I agree, and I'm glad that all of the members actually here actually agree on that. One of the things that we also work with during the Select Committee process, we also heard in terms of, because New Zealand has such a good reputation, being transparent and a place to do business, and it's good for business. And we've actually had situations where overseas financial companies that don't actually belong in New Zealand registering their companies here and never actually providing advice, but they're taking advantage of the fact that they happen to be registered in New Zealand. And this is one of the things that we will actually protect New Zealand people, as well as making sure that those businesses who actually establish here are in fact New Zealand businesses, that they do actually run business here, and they're not just taking advantage of the good name of New Zealand and not actually operating some shyster, fake business or whatever, just to actually take advantage of New Zealand's good name. The other thing that I actually wanted to talk about is the confidence that people actually have. Actually, it reminded me of what Mr. Gareth Hughes actually talked about, and earlier I think Mr. Brett Hudson talked about, is the issue of actually making sure that unintended advice. For example, there are reporters, column writers for newspapers or on blogs or whatever. They're not necessarily financial advice that they're actually giving. They give an opinion. And some of them are experts, some of them are not. And lawyers providing in their everyday transactions where they're dealing with mortgages or discharging mortgages, or giving some advice as to what they should actually do in terms of accountants when they're dealing with their customers. They're not necessarily providing financial advice. And if they're going about in a everyday kind of work, that they're not actually sort of caught in this regime, and also be punished for the everyday work that they actually do. Like, a member of parliament might actually say, maybe you should talk to a financial advisor. Maybe it's a good idea to put some money in a savings account or invest in something. We're not necessarily providing financial advice that, what most people would actually consider financial advice. And I think, as a migrant, one of the things that I have noticed is that, for just talking myself, our parents have a different way of thinking about what savings is or what investment is, because we come from a different culture. You come to New Zealand, and the way that we actually view investment is actually very different. And often migrants, for my parents, it was always about things that are tangible, investing in things that were tangible. So they would never invest in stocks, but they would always put money into things like plant, factories, or buildings. And, as we get more sophisticated, that they will actually move on to other investment portfolios, for example, like stocks. And having good, robust financial advice is what people actually need. And I think this particular piece of legislation provides that and protects New Zealand customers to get the best possible advice that they could have. And I think the very fact that this bill has come to this House, I think it's a great thing, and I commend the bill to the House.
Your time has expired. I'm sorry about that.
Madam Speaker.
I understand this is a split call. You have 5 minutes. Greg O'Connor.
Kia ora, Madam Speaker. It does give me great pleasure to rise on this